Man, what a day, I thought, slamming the office door behind me. Friday evening, and I felt like a squeezed lemon. My nerves were shot, my head buzzing from endless meetings and last-minute deadlines. I decided not to bother driving and called a cab instead, even though I usually drive myself. But today, I just wanted to zone out, not think about the road. The app said the car would be there in 5 minutes. At least I can rest a bit, I thought, leaning against the wall and closing my eyes. Fragments of work flashed through my mind. Colleagues' faces, unhappy clients. An old Renault pulled up, driven by a guy in his late 40s with a tired but piercing look. He wore a worn-out jacket with a checkered scarf peeking out from underneath. "Hey," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Andrew. Where to?" I gave him my address and we set off. I've been working like crazy all week, practically living at the office trying to wrap up a major project. So I just leaned back in the seat, hoping to doze off. But the driver seemed eager to talk. "You know," he began, "in my line of work, you see all sorts of things, especially at night. Different people, different situations. Sometimes it gets downright creepy." I chuckled, but asked out of politeness, "What, something scary happened?" He smirked, but there was a shadow in his eyes. "Yeah, plenty. Like not too long ago, I picked up this guy. Well-dressed, looked like he had money. He was heading to the cemetery at night. Said he needed to pay his respects, some anniversary or something. I figured, whatever, people have their reasons. We got there, he paid, got out, and then I noticed blood on the back seat, a fresh, dark red stain. I almost lost it. But he just walked off into the cemetery like it was nothing, disappearing among the graves. I spent hours cleaning the seat with special chemicals, and then I found this silver cross on the floor where he'd been sitting. It was all blackened, like it had been burned. Still don't know what that was about." He paused, and the car fell silent. I wanted to say something, but Andrew suddenly turned his head sharply, like he'd heard something outside. His face went pale. You know, the weirdest part? A week later, I was driving past that same cemetery, and I saw him, the same guy, standing by the gates, but he looked dead. Gray face, empty eyes. He stared right at me, and then he just vanished, like he was never there. And the next day, that cross I'd thrown away was back in my car. I tossed it in the river, but it came back. Now I keep it with me. I'm scared if I get rid of it, something terrible will happen. I felt a chill run down my spine. Then there was this one time, he continued. I picked up this kid. Couldn't have been more than 20. Pale, shaking, eyes wild. He asked me to take him to this abandoned mental hospital on the outskirts of town. I was like, seriously? That place is a dump. Even the homeless avoid it. But I took him. What else could I do? He didn't say a word the whole ride, just sat there, silent. When we got there, he mumbled something about something living there calling him, said a name, something like Lilith or Lilithan. I asked him to repeat it, but he just shook his head, jumped out, and ran into the ruins. As I was driving away, I heard this scream, blood-curdling, like someone was being slaughtered. It made my hair stand on end. But there was also this sadness in it, like a final cry. I hit the gas and got out of there. Never saw that kid again, and I don't want to. Andrew suddenly hit the brakes and the car jerked. He glanced in the rearview mirror like he expected to see something behind us. But the creepiest part? A couple days later, I drove past that hospital again, and I saw him, the kid, in one of the upper windows, covered in blood. And behind him, something was moving, something big and dark. I didn't stop, just floored it. When I got home, there was a note on the back seat. "Thanks for bringing me. She's free now." I still don't know what that means. I felt a cold shiver run through me. "And then there was this couple," Andrew went on. "Young, good-looking, probably on a date," I thought. But then I glanced in the rearview mirror and the girl's eyes. They were black, like coal. No pupils, no whites, just pure black. I almost swerved off the road. She must have noticed because she blinked and her eyes were normal again, blue. I spent the rest of the ride avoiding the mirror, just focusing on the road. When I dropped them off, I didn't even wait for a tip. Just crossed myself and got out of there. He suddenly pulled over to the side of the road, his hands trembling. But the weirdest part, the next day, I was driving the same route and I saw her, the same girl, standing on the side of the road. But her eyes weren't black this time. They were red, and she was smiling, this terrifying smile. I didn't stop, just drove past. When I got home, her scarf was on the back seat, covered in blood. I burned it, but the smell, it's still in the car. Then there was this one girl, he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Just a regular brunette, petite, nothing unusual. We were chatting about the weather, small talk, you know. Then out of nowhere, she goes quiet. And then she says, "Do you know you're going to die soon?" I almost choked. "What are you talking about?" I asked. She just looked at me, calm as anything, and said, "I just know. In 3 days, in a car accident." I laughed it off, thought she was messing with me. But she just turned away and didn't say another word. He paused and his voice got even quieter. The next day, I got into an accident. A wheel came off while I was driving. I was lucky to walk away. 2 days later, just like she said, another accident. This time, it was bad. I barely made it out alive. Since then, I've been different, more careful, more aware. You never know what people are capable of or what they know. He suddenly stopped talking, and his face went pale. But the creepiest part, a week later I was driving the same route and I saw her, the same girl, standing on the side of the road, but now she was all in white, like a ghost. She looked at me, smiled, and then she was gone. I still don't know who she was. We pulled up to my place. "You know," Andrew said, his voice heavy, "us cab drivers, we see a lot. So many people, so many stories. Sometimes you just need to talk about it. Thanks for listening." He honked the horn as a goodbye, and his Renault disappeared into the evening haze. A week later, I decided to take a cab again. For some reason, I wanted to hear more of Andrew's stories. I called the number, and after a couple of rings, I heard the usual. "Dispatch, Sarah speaking. Where to?" "Hi," I said. "To Ivazovsky Street. But can you send Andrew, the guy with the gray Renault?" There was a long pause on the other end. I thought the call had dropped, but then Sarah's voice came back, shaky and uncertain. "I'm sorry, but Andrew doesn't work here anymore. He, died in a car accident a few months ago." My blood ran cold. I pulled the phone away from my ear and ended the call with trembling fingers.